How has it been to do this transition now into the music world and singing and having such a strong following?
Indie sleaze was a real cultural movement between the mid 2000s and 2012. Some may debate that it carried on until 2014, but it's conventionally agreed upon that it died in 2012. It was an era strongly defined by its hedonistic nightlife, optimistic pushback against late stage capitalism and the 2007 recession, DIY anything goes fashion, point and shoot high flash photography, and eclectic rock and electronic music that often blended into genres like electroclash and other diffusions. An era without the weight of social media where you could go to a party, meet Lady Gaga or Kate Moss in an outfit you bought at the thrift store a few hours prior with glitter and smudged makeup all over your face and have the best night of your life, with the night before being a close second, seems like a far cry from the era we live in today. The end of the COVID 19 lockdown, however, saw a revival of this era bubbling under the surface of society, with the youth desiring a chance to let loose and get back all the time they feel like they lost when the world got put on pause. Every year, faithful indie sleaze revival believers speculate that we're getting closer to a re-edition of this golden age due to more and more conditions of the first wave being met. The debate of whether or not this revival will happen or if it's even possible gets more and more heated by the day, and I want to say my piece. My name is Dolce Jeans, and today I'll be going over indie sleaze and its components and whether or not I think it's possible in this day and age to have a revival. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and without further ado, let's get into it. The original indie sleaze wave had roots in the 80s grunge, electronic or dance culture, and punk movements. These roots are mainly embodied through fashion, with sleazers bringing back pieces like bright colored tights, eclectic makeup, excessive jewelry, and crazy hairdos of the electronic or dance scene of the 80s, mixed with flannels, converses, beanies, and secondhand clothing of grunge, and skinny jeans and leather jackets of the punk movement. Indie sleaze came directly after the end of the McBling era, which was the answer to the conservativeness that had been dominant in the world years prior. The McBling era was characterized by flashy, flamboyant, and extravagant displays of wealth with brands like Louis Vuitton, Juicy Couture, and Von Dutch. With this information, we can then make sense of why the McBling era began to die down from about 2006 to 2008 when the Great Recession put the nail in the coffin. But as the Great Recession killed one cultural movement, it strengthened another. Indie sleaze had already started to make waves in New York, Los Angeles, and London from as early as 2005, but the prime years were 2008 to 2010. These years were characterized by a pushback against dark times and late-stage capitalism, with the proven antithetic grunge and punk aesthetics and their components providing a laissez-faire but still rebellious mood mixed with the optimism of the 80s dance, electronic, and disco elements, especially prevalent in the nightlife of the times, as the youth's answer to the dire straits of the economy was to party through it. The popularity of these styles were strengthened through designers like Eddie Slimane at Dior, Christophe de Carnin at Balmain, and Jeremy Scott throughout the 2000s. Eddie Slimane pushed the skinny leather-clad look through his Dior-owned collections and frequently dressed popular defining artists at the time like Pete Doherty and Justice. The whole blazers with skinny jeans, Chelsea boots, beanies, and scarves? Although it was very adjacent to hipster attire as well, we cannot understate Eddie Slamane's importance in the indie sleaze movement, as he rose up in the fashion industry at the same time of the popularization of this cultural shift. Christophe de Carnin sort of provided a lot of the feminine attire for this time as well, with pretty much three-quarter skinny jeans, leather jackets and blazers alike, drapey shirts, tight dresses, skirts, and long flowy dresses as well. I don't know why people just don't talk about him like at all. Balmain pretty much destroyed him, and he wasn't as popular as Eddie, of course, but I'd argue he carried the zeitgeist of the times just as well as Eddie did. As well as Jeremy Scott. Jeremy Scott brought the bright, crazy, creative colors of the 80s electronic dance scene through his work with Moschino and Adidas. His importance also cannot be understated. Scott, Slimane, and de Carnin were the three horsemen of, well, not the apocalypse, but it was a lovely time, this era. On a not so high fashion scale, more accessible and common pieces came from American Apparel, Urban Outfitters, and thrift stores. Many original indie sleazers like Olivia V, the videographer who runs the unofficial Indie Sleaze Instagram account she created in 2021, and Alexa Chung have explained that the fashion of the time had no actual requirements and it was quite spontaneous, with many outfits worn to the parties purchased hours before. Although we can observe common and recurring pieces now when looking back, it's not like that's all the people wore at the time. Anything from slogan t-shirts like the classic "I paused my game to be here," tacky and excessive arm jewelry, headbands, ripped tights, fedoras, Napoleon jackets, Adidas high tops, Converses, Chelsea boots, colorful striped shirts, and anything else you can find at a thrift store could be spotted in these parties. Inexpensive DIY fashion dominated the times because that's actually all a lot of the people could afford because, Great Recession and all. It was all out of necessity unless you were a rich celebrity or, something like that. The music that dominated the indie sleaze era was often post-garage, rock and roll, and electronic. Bands like MGMT, The Strokes, The Kills, LCD Sound System, Justice, MIA, Daft Punk, Arctic Monkeys, The Libertines, Crystal Castles, Interpol, and many, many more dominated the era. Sorry if I missed your fave. A lot of it was fast and cheerful sounding, even if the lyrics were actually quite the opposite. If it didn't make you want to freak out and go crazy and shout at the top of your lungs against the world, it made you dance pretty much. A lot of the stars of these bands actually made a name for themselves outside of music, often for just their style or how cool they were perceived, like Julian Casablancas of The Strokes, or how Eddie Slimane frequently worked with Pete Doherty of the Libertines or the French EDM duo Justice. A lot of these bands has released an album in the past year or two, which is another reason why people believe in an indie sleaze revival, but we'll get to that soon enough. The only reason why we can even witness any of this gilded era of pure human expression is due to the mass popularity of flash photography during these times. Internet blogs like thecobrasnake.com, a blog of the infamous photographer Mark Hunter, or the Cobra Snake, were gaining popularity during the early and mid 2000s. Mark would frequent indie sleaze parties and photograph the scenes. If you were lucky, you could find yourself on his website days after posing for him, or just getting caught off guard during a raucous night out. People would actually spend a lot of time scrolling through his website trying to find themselves, so maybe they weren't that different from us after all. MySpace was also gaining lots of popularity as well, and being able to share photos of yourself on the internet carefree influenced a lot of people to start documenting their nights out with their friends and sharing them with anybody who could see. If it wasn't a point and shoot camera, it was a BlackBerry. Those phones were wildly popular, even in Jamaica, trust me. The amateur flash photography of the time has a magic to it that cannot be recreated, even with the same cameras used in parties and concerts today. Because everything was just so raw and nothing was hidden, not even the substance use. We look back at our big brothers and sisters knowing how much those moments meant to them. Could it ever mean just as much to us? Keep watching, we're getting closer. I'm going to speak on the partying and the Great Recession at the same time because there's a strong connection there, of course. Plain and simple, nobody would have been partying nearly as much or as hard if the recession wasn't happening. It's the common tool of escape for disillusioned and confused youth. Just party through it. The partying came with a lot of substances, misogyny, abuse, and even pedophilia, sadly. But the partying was what it was. A lot of backlash was dished out to the sleazers actually, as partying during horrible times like that was seen as insensitive, tone deaf, blah 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 old people. But the attitude came because of those hard times. It kinda couldn't get any worse and nobody knew what would happen tomorrow, so why not just let loose? This is actually a common thing in history to happen because right before World War II in France, optimism flooded the country as they all knew what was about to happen. So the fashion got as optimistic and grand as possible and they all partied like it would be their last day as they braced for the storm. The difference with the sleazers, of course, is that they didn't have to do things like ration food or live under German occupation, so they just partied through regular life. The recession furthered the necessity of thrifting as well, and the music fought back as best as it could. It's all thanks to the recession, all of it. In these parties, you'd have present and future it girls making names for themselves by sometimes even just being there from sundown to sun up, like Sky Ferreira, Corey Kennedy, Chloe Sevigny, Kate Moss, along with celebrities like Kanye, Miley Cyrus, Jeremy Scott, Lady Gaga, Kid Cudi, etc. The nightlife is where indie sleaze found its voice, and that's the lens through which we view it today. The death of indie sleaze slowly crept up after 2010 due to certain factors like the iPhone coming out, making flash photography even more democratized, and Facebook essentially killing MySpace as it absolutely took off. Facebook taking off meant more people got on social media, and people could like and comment on everything now. With such a large user count comes scrutiny and surveillance, which means people began being very self-conscious of their image and began to create their projected, contrived avatars of themselves outward on the internet, causing the real and raw to be further and further suppressed. This killed the need for indie sleaze parties because that side of people just became more and more dormant. And also, times started to get better after the recession. Social media is largely to blame, and we'll be inspecting social media's part to play in any such indie sleaze revival in just a second. New indie sleaze composes of a lot of electronic bands, duos, you name it. Snow Strippers, The Dare, The Help, Suzy Shear, Damon R, Two Hollis. These are all very popular names that get grouped up with the new wave of indie sleaze. The parties aren't as crazy, but the substances are still present along with all of the other dark aspects, sadly. The fashion, from what I can see, is honestly just a rehash of the mid-2000s wave, just as how the mid-2000s wave took from the 80s wave 20 years before them. I personally feel like the way how the revival is going, the redoing of the styles is a lot more tasteless and on the nose than the mid-2000s wave was taking elements and making it their own in a unique way. To me, my opinion, guys, okay? To me, my opinion, the revival isn't that unique in terms of how it looks. There are shouts that we are in a recession right now, or at least gearing up for one. There aren't any designers really outlining that type of zeitgeist for us. The music kind of lines up in a way, and I'm not sure if we're partying more than average right now, and I do think a lot more people are getting personal digital cameras. But now to answer the question you're here for, is an indie sleaze revival really possible? Do I think an indie sleaze revival is possible? No, absolutely not. I do not think it's possible in the slightest, because indie sleaze is a beautiful moment in their culture that happened and passed. We should let it pass like every other moment passes. A lot of us are new in Gen Z and are romanticizing experiences that we did not live through, looking through photographs, listening to old music, and hearing testimonies from the older crowd, thinking that we want a piece of that, so let's recreate exactly what they did. No, it will be different and it will never be the same. I think the closest you can get to any type of indie sleaze revival is to party on your own and make your own new moment in culture and make your own stamp on history. I think that's what we should be focusing on instead of trying to recreate an experience that we did not live through, because we can't be for sure if that's exactly what it would be if we didn't experience the first one. I think we should try and make our own dent in the city of life, guys. I think we should do that instead. There was a really big recession. I mentioned that earlier. I think that cannot be understated. The recession was huge. Everybody was affected by it. And a lot of indie sleaze was just a lifestyle those people could afford. It wasn't just about the partying. It was about the mood of the entire time. That's what made everything magical, because everybody was just surviving off of what they could. That's why every outfit was magical, because that's really all you could do. That's all you could put together. And everybody knew it, so nobody would judge, because everybody was going through the same thing. Social barriers were broken down because we were all struggling through life together, so it didn't matter what you look like or what clique you belong to, what subculture you belong to. We were all in those parties for the same thing. You'd meet new people all the time. And of course, this is me speaking for the perspective of someone that didn't live through it either, but all I can really do is draw on the testimonies of the living people who did actually live through it. That's a lot of what my information is based on, unfortunately, along with the resources that are actually out there from people on the internet who like to share their stories with like bigger publications for articles and things like that. But a lot of people grouped up in those parties, no matter who you were. If you're a celebrity, gay, straight, whatever you were in there for the same thing. You wanted to party and you wanted to have fun and live life like nobody was watching. Because the recession took a lot away from people, and a lot of people were unsure of the times of what would happen in the future, so they partied like it was their last. Maybe that's being sensational about the situation. Maybe I'm sensationalizing it and romanticizing it. My bad if I am. But I think we are going through some rough times financially and morally throughout the world, but I don't think we're anywhere near an actual recession to the point where we're at our wits, okay? Some places might be and some people might be, and maybe that's how they're getting through. Maybe they are actually having something that's really similar to an indie sleaze revival. But I think the main people involved in the discourse are the ones that are looking through it to a rose-tinted lens and are not understanding very fundamental parts of why they were living like they were living in the original wave. I think anything that could help us get closer to an actual indie sleaze revival would be another world-shocking event, like a crazy recession that would actually scare people to their core and make them live a lot more frugally. The importance of the recession cannot be understated. I think that's another reason why we will never have an original indie sleaze ever again, because we're just not going through the same thing, especially not right now. Another reason why indie sleaze cannot be revived is because yes, social media is a big problem, and yes, we are very hyper aware. Now, I do want to say I feel like this problem is slightly exaggerated in social media circles where the discourse of indie sleaze revival is happening. Because yes, our generation of, Gen Z, the newer half of Gen Z especially, are very hyper aware, and as a result, a lot of it would be very performative, but not necessarily because of social media, but because we already have an idea of what is supposed to be in mind. So it can never be genuine because we're going to go into it with the idea of trying to recreate something that we didn't even live through. So it would be like us trying to do our own simulation of something that already happened. Like there's a simulation simulacra argument to be made there, but I'm not too hip on Baudrillard yet, so I can't make it. Sorry. But with the whole social media hyper aware performative stuff, people need to understand that back then, the sleazers who were actually living through the original golden wave of indie sleaze posed for a lot of pictures because they knew it would get posted on Cobra Snake, and then they would go through Cobra Snake the next day looking for themselves on the page hours and hours and hours on end, trying to find themselves on Cobra Snake. I can't pronounce that. So we're not very performative differently from our big brothers and sisters. Like they were also, very aware of what they were doing. Sometimes, especially when Cobra Snake would line up his camera and tell everybody to pose, they would pose. Okay? Again, I am admitting that my sources are from human people who are putting their testimonies out there on the internet because that's the only way I would know stuff like this. If you want to critique that, I'm perfectly fine with that. We can have the discourse in the comments, okay? Let's be friendly. But yes, there is still a big difference in terms of social media influence on our subconscious and how we act compared to our predecessors. Because they grew up mainly without social media, and then when MySpace and Facebook came out, they adopted it, especially MySpace. So they knew how to party like no one was watching before all of the social media surveillance came out. Us, on the other hand, a lot of us grew up with social media majorly affecting how we acted and how we presented ourselves in social spaces because we felt like somebody was always watching, somebody was always scrutinizing. You could always be getting videoed or photographed by somebody, or you'd hear about it on social media the day after if you were acting a fool. So a lot of us don't want to act how we really want to act because we're scared of looking stupid. Same reason why people don't get in pools at pool parties anymore. Everybody's too cool. So yes, I do think we have a bigger problem in terms of everybody being too cool and not knowing how to party like no one's watching compared to our big brothers and sisters. I think that definitely is a factor that would make indie sleaze revival a lot more different, along with the fact that we're going to have the original era in mind. So we're going to be doing a lot of things not genuinely, and it's going to be looking really weird at some point trying to recreate this thing that already happened instead of, doing our own thing. But this could all be some really bad conjecture, and actually all of that could happen in the next few months. Who knows? Only time will tell, so let's stay tuned. That's the end of the video though. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. I put a lot into this video. If you did like it, please like and subscribe for more. And I really appreciate comments more than anything else. So if you want to have a discussion below, not an argument, a discussion, because there's two places I'm not going with nobody and it's back and forth, okay? But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.